Hello. I'm here today to express my strong opposition to a masquerade which just took place in Côte d'Ivoire through the illegal and gruesome killing of a Ivorian civilian ordered by Mr. Alassane Ouattara and carried out by the French-led UN security forces. These killings and violent military attacks were followed by the unlawful arrest of President Gbagbo, his family, and his entourage. I hereby condemn with my last energy Mr. Ouattara, the French-led UN forces, and the Joint Chief of Staff of the Army of Côte d'Ivoire of high treason and complicity with the terrorist forces of Mr. Ouattara for the coup d'etat perpetrated on April 11, 2010 against President Gbagbo, as well as for the violation of a human right and for all humanitarian consequences inherent to this coup. Let me remind you that this is a coup because there was elections. These elections were not proper, and solutions were being sought when Mr. Alassane Ouattara ordered a raid against President Gbagbo to arrest him. So this is clearly a coup d'etat. I invite the people of Côte d'Ivoire to remain calm for their own safety and to obtain, to exercise restraint, to abstain from working or pledging allegiance to Mr. Ouattara and to his entire team. Mr. Ouattara is not the democratically elected president of Côte d'Ivoire. I repeat, Mr. Ouattara is not the democratically elected president of Côte d'Ivoire because there was no democratic elections in Côte d'Ivoire. I further urge the people of Côte d'Ivoire not to pledge allegiance either with the members of a terrorist group or the Force Nouvelle or with any other local and foreign military groups or factions in Côte d'Ivoire. Côte d'Ivoire is a peaceful, democratic country. Therefore, Côte d'Ivoire will continue its stride toward democracy and development solely on these noble foundations. In fact, since our independence, Côte d'Ivoire has been very peaceful and have had several solid and respectable official institutions through which we were able to use dialogue as our sole weapon, and by which the nobility and the power of intelligence and wisdom prevailed to lead us toward a stronger economy and a steady development without ever having to resort to destructive terrorist forces. The November 28, 2010 elections that led to the chaotic situation in Côte d'Ivoire were rigged and manipulated to create disorder and social unrest. Let me remind you that I was opposed to these elections, and I wrote to President Barack Obama, to Hillary Clinton, to the US Congress, the Security Council of the UN, Secretary General, to President Sarkozy, and to many other African leaders, including national leaders of Côte d'Ivoire, to tell them to halt these elections because I knew that we will come to this. It would lead to a huge humanitarian problem. And I was right for having raised the red flag. And I started complaining about this, showing my opposition to these elections since 2009. There were so many frauds, and some of my reports were published in the newspaper, and the letters submitted to those officials are still available, but they were not taken seriously. So, in my view, these elections were used to create disorder and social unrest, and to launch a destruction of a nation, and to set the stage to blame it all on President Gbagbo in order to arrest him. And prior to launching the humanitarian aid service scheme that is usually used to cover up the trendy yet virtual economic development opportunities that is always selectively offered by the international community. In other words, in Africa, they always, a foreign country, Western country, always lead the country, an African country, into a chaotic situation, just to use that as an excuse to fuel the country with humanitarian funds or funds that are geared toward the development of the country. But if you look closely, the money is never used for that purpose. It goes back into the pocket of those who put together the scheme, the destabilization scheme. So in this case, Cote d'Ivoire, being a very rich country by the Western African standard, it was important for the oppressors and robbers to do all it takes to destabilize the country and to impose an economist that is acquainted with vicious world corruption ring, to help derive the most profit for all rings members, even if it required the use of fake election as their trampoline. Let me remind you that Mr. Alassane Ouattara is an economist who has been trying to lead the country of Cote d'Ivoire unconstitutionally. And he was genuinely interested in being at the helm of the country, knowing very well at the beginning that he was not qualified. It was Mr. President Gbagbo who signed a special order for him to be on the ballot. And so Mr. Gbagbo also who signed a special order for Mr. Alassane Ouattara to obtain his right for residency in Cote d'Ivoire. So clearly, Mr. Alassane Ouattara was very eager to run the race, but he didn't fulfill a requirement. And now he has done everything to eliminate his opponent and to force himself into the presidential palace. And all that in order to use this system, to use this financial system to rob the country of Cote d'Ivoire along with his friends. Therefore, I strongly denounce this scheme and declare these elections null and void. Cote d'Ivoire can continue its stride toward development without participating into the plundering and unequal share of the world wealth conventionally carried out by some countries vested with the egoistic and special interests. Thus, considering the absence of a president of Cote d'Ivoire, owing to the fact that he was unjustifiably kidnapped by Mr. Alassane Ouattara, I'm requesting the immediate and unconditional release of President Gbagbo and his spouse and member of his entourage. And I'm urging the President of a National Assembly to put in place all appropriate constitutional, democratic, peaceful measures that will be favorable to the restoration of a long-lasting peace and stability of a country, to end the consequences of these fraudulent elections. In Cote d'Ivoire, we have a tradition to rely on dialogue and wisdom and to solve our problems. And we have been very successful at using dialogue as our main weapon. We shall not stop now, and definitely not because of these elections, for which we could have found a simple solution instead of resorting to this bombing and to these barbarian solutions. So the National Assembly of Cote d'Ivoire has the constitutional right and capacities to substitute itself to the executive branch of a country and to solve all natural problems through dialogue and wisdom. Thus, I'm exhorting the National Assembly of Cote d'Ivoire to assume its constitutional duty immediately. I'm confident that the President of the National Assembly can take all appropriate initiatives to lead the country toward the implementation of a constitutional and democratic solution favorable to a long-term stability of a country. Lastly, I would like to mention that Mrs. Gbagbo Mrs. Simone Gbagbo is a doctorate she's highly educated, and she has a PhD, and so she's not someone, she's not a person of the street, and she's also a parliamentarian. She's also a first lady. With all these come diplomatic immunity, so she can't be arrested like this. Someone with diplomatic immunity must go through a normal procedure before that person can be arrested or roughed the way she was. And Mr. Gbagbo also is a highly educated person. He is a doctor in all his rights. He's also he has obtained his PhD from Sorbonne, which is equivalent to Harvard University, but in France, and he's a well respected person in Côte d'Ivoire, the father of democracy in Côte d'Ivoire, multipartism in Côte d'Ivoire, and so he is not also a bandit that can be treated the way he has been treated. Being the president of Côte d'Ivoire, by virtue of his election in 2002, Mr. Gbagbo also has a diplomatic immunity, and he is the Grand Master of the National Order of Côte d'Ivoire. Therefore, he couldn't be arrested the way he was arrested. Procedure must be followed, and his honor must be respected. And the kids are looking, many people are looking, and it is better to follow the right procedure. In the United States, the president cannot be arrested like this. Everywhere else, the president cannot be arrested. He has to go through a normal impeachment proceeding. And in this particular case, because of these elections, there is no ground for bombarding Mr. Gbagbo's residence when he could have been seized or asked politely to leave his residence. These efforts were not asked. He was simply asked to leave office when they were still discussing the issue of a post-electoral crisis. Mr. Gbagbo has requested a recount because the elections obviously was full of fraud, irregularities, and he was trying to resolve the problem peacefully. Let me remind you that in 2000, when Mr. Gbagbo became president, 2002, there was a vice-rebel who actually claimed to have been financed by Mr. Ouattara. Mr. Gbagbo was forced to accept these rebels in his government. He has never used any weapon to try to destroy them for as long as they worked together. And if he stayed for 10 years, it is because he was working along with them to try to resolve the situation and try to find a way to organize a clean, transparent elections. So he did not reign for 10 years as a dictator. He was at the helm of a country constitutionally, because by our constitution, if we can't go to elections, if the country is in danger by virtue of the fact that it is taken hostage, the president can elect to remain in power, which is what he did. So he was legally in power for as long as the country was in that situation and there was no elections. Now, the elections was organized under a very deleterious condition, and as I said earlier, I blew a whistle to stop it, and no one listened to me, and it was a total fraud. You don't go to the headquarters of one of the candidates to proclaim the result of the elections, even if the proclamation of the result was a problem. The head of the independence commission could have requested time and security to pronounce the result elsewhere in the country. The country is a very large country, and he didn't have to go in the hotel where Mr. Alassane Ouattara was to proclaim the result. This invalidates the result, hinder the entire integrity of the electoral system, and it is in light of all this incongruity, of all these irregularities, that Mr. Gbagbo stayed in at his position to try to find a peaceful solution. So I think that Mr. Gbagbo must be released. I'm ordering his release, asking Mr. Ouattara, who has kidnapped him and his family, to release him and to avail himself for new elections New elections must follow. A new presidential election must follow the local elections. What I mean by local elections are elections for the mayor, for the representative of the assembly, and of the senate. For the past years, we didn't have any elections in that area, so there was no way to measure the new system, the new electoral system. There was no way to measure the efficacy, the efficiency of a new electoral system that has been put in place. And I don't think that it is the best way to test this system, which has never been tested. And by using this model, starting with with small elections, we can test the credibility and the efficiency of the electoral system, and move forward. And based on these success stories, we can move to the presidential elections after a year or so. But they spent 10 years trying to resolve the problem. They weren't able to resolve it. And after the elections, only four months in looking for the situation, they were not patient enough, and they start. Mr. Alassane Ouattara ordered the UN and the French to start shooting at people, and we've seen the worst atrocities in the country ever, and we don't need that. I think that it is time for us to put the weapon down and to use our intellect as we used to do before, and to use our weapon, which is wisdom and peace, to try to resolve this problem. We can do it. We have the ability to do it. 40 years of peace is very indicative of our ability to resolve a problem peacefully. So I'm calling on the international community to face down their support to Mr. Alassane Ouattara, because he is not the democratically elected president. You cannot push someone onto a population, and because the way you enter the office will determine the way you run it. And I can tell you that many people are not happy, and it's not 100 people, it's millions of people. So are they going to kill the millions of supporters of Mr. Gbagbo who are currently thinking? You see what I'm saying? So I think that it would be best to be wise and to choose a way of wisdom to resolve this matter, and we can do that. We have to look into the fraudulent nature of these elections. There's no doubt. The records are there. There are many international observers who showed that these elections were not credible, were not transparent, were not trustworthy. And the proclamation of the result clearly shows that also. The violences also. All these corroborate to the fact that these results should not be considered as final results. And I'm calling for new elections that would be organized in a more friendly, more democratic setting.